Hi, and welcome back to Bull Squash. So today we're doing a recap video of the World Tour Finals that just finished up a couple days ago. Unfortunately, as I mentioned in my comment, when I did the upload, that was just, I believe, it's probably within less than an hour of me finding out that Gregoire March had replaced Ferrez-Dasuki in the draw, and basically the entire men's side was pretty much changed. So my prediction definitely went out the window there. So I feel a little disappointed. I definitely, put in a decent amount of work into that, but hey, you know what, sometimes you get a mix-up and makes for some interesting situations like we saw with Gregoire March coming in, kind of just flying in last minute and then actually having a pretty good tournament. Obviously the predictions there would have changed. I don't necessarily know if I would have predicted Asal to have won that, but I had made some notes. I just wanted to go over a couple things I noticed in the tournament and just give my thoughts. So to start with that, I do apologize again for the men's side, but on the women's side, I was fairly close. I definitely didn't predict Shireen losing to Serm, so that was one aspect that I missed, but I did end up getting the final right with Hania versus Nuran. So kind of just coming into my notes, just going to grab them quick. I definitely noticed, so first off, in the first match with Sherbagi and Asal, I think that was the second match of the tournament, whatever, I was really disappointed with the refereeing. It's a funny thing. I live in Canada and I follow the NHL quite extensively, not as much as squash, but I do follow hockey quite tightly, and what I've noticed there is that they're having issues with their refereeing consistency, and I've heard commentators saying worst sport in the world for refereeing, and unfortunately not many people know about squash, or fortunately, depending on what you think. So it was one of those moments where I was in the tournament where I'm just thinking to myself, man, people are losing matches to bad refereeing a lot. And you would think it would, for the most part, it doesn't happen that much in early rounds, but especially between two very closely ranked players, you get into situations where it's 10-all tie breaks. You're going to have a bad call or two, and it seems to happen every tournament a few times. So it's something that needs to improve with refereeing. Again, I've posted before about a couple ideas, definitely having the referee staying closer, but until such time that PSA deems it worthy, they're not really looking to improve things. I know that they've got Roy Gingell working on getting videos, but I honestly haven't seen anything that would point me towards that currently they have more consistency. Some of the matches at the end I definitely found on the women's side, especially Hania's matches, were better ref, but I find that it's more because of her, because she just wants to play the ball at the time. Whereas with the men's side, especially players like Asal are getting better, definitely not trying to fish as much, but still there's a lot there, which says a lot about how he was before. So I think there is definitely room improvement for the referees in this tournament in that regard. So on the first match, I don't know what's up with PSA. I understand, I don't understand what happens like in Egypt, who runs the tournament. I know Kareem Darwish is kind of like the director of it, or something in that vein. But I find it very frustrating when your very first match, the lights go out and you have to wait half an hour. There's a lot of disruptions. The injury breaks, not understanding. So with Sherbagi, the blood injury, it was bad, don't get me wrong, but I didn't understand what was going on when they were repairing him up. I guess he wasn't confident in the stitch. I actually have had a similar injury. I don't know if you can notice, but I actually have a scar above my eye. It's kind of hard to see in this camera, but I actually had a similar injury where I got a racket to the eye, or just above the eyebrow, I should say, and it's brutally painful. So, and it's bleeding and you need stitches, but you technically can carry on. I mean, I've done it and actually won. I think I won a game after that, but definitely wasn't something I'd want to repeat, go to the hospital right away kind of thing. But you have to do a lot of covering to prevent it from bleeding again, right? Because you don't want to forfeit the match. But I just going back to the lights, like logistically, PSA needs to get their stuff in order. They do not seem prepared at the beginning of these tournaments, and I understand again the individual tournament organizers they do their part, and I definitely put some of the blame on them. But PSA's a professional, they're the Professional Association of Squash representing and marketing it. If they're not doing a good job, it is not a very good way of marketing the game to outsiders, where you have all these disruptions. So I was definitely disappointed in that. They've had a few power outages before. They've been to Egypt so many times this year. They should know, or Cairo, whatever. They should know what to expect and be more prepared in the future. I mean, this is not the first time they've done this. So again, just disappointed there. So Sherbini, and I was kind of disappointed here, but this is also a bit of the nature. So she got kicked out of the group stage, and I found with her that it took her a little. She's a high precision player. I found it took her a little bit of time in that first match to get into things, and by then Camille Stern played an amazing first match against Sherbini. She was very accurate. Camille Stern, when she's feeling confident in her attacking game, can be one of the best attacking players, finish like anything, but she pretty much only does that, like, I don't know, against top players maybe once every 4 or 5 matches. She doesn't seem to have it in her to do it on a consistent basis, but she did it there. And yeah, definitely with the best of 3 matches, if you're not starting well and if you're not shooting very fast, I mean, you can get punished so quick, and that might be also very interesting enough a consequence of Sherbini having to play Serm, whereas had she played say like Hani first, where it's not a gimme, but definitely would have been more favorable, she could have gone into the tournament a bit better. So it's funny how order of things could have an effect. I'm not saying they would have here, but she definitely didn't play to her best. I found that, especially with a bouncier ball, she was playing a little too fast-paced for her game. She's a little bit bigger. As soon as she goes into that high speed, she can get herself caught out of position a lot more and forced to move. And I found that that's where she was making mistakes, just not slowing down the ball enough and controlling the pace like she normally does. So she wasn't able to get on her favorite volley and consistently push the players back and forth. It was just too fast paced. So that would pretty much, for me, explain why she didn't. My prediction there didn't go as well, because I found she was playing slightly out of character. But again, best of 3, it can cause a little bit of panic, force you to play a little faster than you want to. So that was definitely that was a little bit of disappointment in my prediction. So another thing I noticed, and this is something I would almost ask a ref, but I do not know what the definition is of a stroke versus a let on a wide angle shot. So a lot of the time players will hit a very wide shot into the wall from the front to avoid the volley, which is obviously a good play. But the problem is, if it's too wide, then it's going to come out, even out of the back, pretty far towards the hitting player. So I know Joelle King had called had this happen to her, where a wide ball was hit against her. She goes to the back. She thinks the player's in front of her. They call a let. The original calls a let, but then she goes for review. So whenever I see these reviews, I honestly don't know. I know the basis is as long as they have the entire front wall, and to me, it doesn't seem to happen that way. It's almost like they're saying, if you have open space on the right, even if you have a shot, kind of towards the player that may or may not hit the front wall, they're expecting you to hit it that way, which is, to me, completely against the rule, or doesn't follow the rules, where you have the entire front wall. If you want to, kind of go against the grain towards the player, you have that option, or you're supposed to, but they don't usually call it that way. She did get a stroke, I think, one reversal, but a couple of times I found the refereeing a little inconsistent in this particular circumstance. And that's one of those areas where I'd like to see the rules a bit more codified, or better worded, so that you actually know when those would be strokes and when those would be lets. I feel like in my mind, I know what it is, but it doesn't seem to happen consistently enough. So the Macon Moment match, this was probably the most, how would you say, this was one of the dumbest decisions I think PSA made or has made in a long time. I know this is with the refereeing, but I'm sure the PSA could have got involved, where they should have either just delayed the match further, waited for supposedly. So, just a bit of context: this match, the humidity was unbearable. The floors were slippery as can be, and one of the reasons why they didn't have the fans in the front. You sometimes see them, kind of the big silver ones or steel ones in the front, basically used to dry up the court. The reason that apparently they didn't have it is someone locked it away and they didn't know where the key was. Yeah, that happens at professional events. So anyway, they didn't have the fans, and what happens next? Well, what you would think on a wet court. Both players were slipping. Momin was complaining like crazy about this in the first game, but and Macon, don't get me wrong, I think he doesn't like getting into these head games because I think he feels like if he's the one complaining a lot, he's giving an advantage to his opponent, which typically is true, especially in refereeing calls, but this was just a dangerous situation. He was sliding around everywhere, and I've had a similar situation happen. It was more with my shoes not being grippy enough, but in effect the same thing where you're just sliding around, you cannot get into a proper lunge, and when you do try, you tend to strain the groin. And I've had an adductor strain, which took me a long time to recover from. Even today, I still have. I played actually for the first time in a few months on Friday, and it was sore after. I mean, I stretched out my groin, and I still felt a little bit. It doesn't happen to me. It doesn't affect me at all. It just comes up every now and again. Before, like a few years ago, it was clicking, but it's been better now. But still there a little bit, and it's not an injury you want. It is, especially for a player like Macon, whose movement is like 90% of his game. So I found this to be just horrendous that they didn't decide to at least move it to another venue, just indoors. It wasn't even a match. I mean, okay, so to be clear, I guess Momin could have moved on in the match. I want to say the guys at PSA had it wrong, the commentators, because they had said that if Macon won, he would have gone through, but he was 0-2 in his first two, and I think he lost them both. I think because he lost to Marsh, and Marsh had 6 points, I don't think he was going to be able to make it through. Oh no, maybe he had 5. Oh, okay, yeah. So actually, sorry. So because, so basically, Macon would have had to win it 2-0. So anyway, that was a complicated group, but you want Macon to be healthy. You want your players' safety to be of the utmost importance, because you need the top players are what represent your game. So I just found that dumb, just flat out dumb. Why wouldn't you just put it to another venue? They do that all the time. So I was thoroughly disappointed that they did that, but maybe it was just time of the day. It was the last match, very late, so they just didn't want to move it to another venue. I'm glad. I'm hoping no one got injured, but you never know. So we're going to look to see what happens at the World Championships, if there's any sort of lingering effects from that, because there were some extreme movements, and I don't know if either player could have gotten injured. I don't think Momin did. I think he kind of held up a bit more, used his more of a shot making to move Macon around, but Macon was not looking good at the end of that match. In my opinion, he could be fine. So going into the before the finals, so to contrast, so Sherbagi had a match against Marwan where he basically just threw it away. He kind of said, "Okay, I'm already through. There's no reason to expend energy," and I can respect that, but it doesn't make for good squash. You could tell at the end of that match against his brother where he just basically capitulated, and it became a nothing match. I'm guessing he did it so that also his brother would have a chance to make it to the final. I don't necessarily like that, but and at the same time, he might have been hoping to get a better matchup. If he lost that, then he knew with a good amount of certainty that he was going to play Paul Cole. So maybe he felt that was a better matchup than, say, Tarek Momin, or it wasn't worth it to fight out that match just to get to play Tarek Momin. He might have also felt confident against either Momin or who else would he have played? So it would have been either Momin or maybe, actually he wouldn't have known. It could have been Macon too at that point. So he must have felt more confident against anyone against that group. But, I do like it more when players try. And Noran Gohar had her last match against Sherbini. She was in. She was guaranteed in. But I think she really knew that in order to win the tournament, she had to eliminate Sherbini. She was not going to beat Sherbini as easily in a best of 5. In a best of 5 versus the best of 3. That was why she worked so hard to win that match, because she knew, if she got to the group stages and had to play Joelle King, I think at the time she knew she was going to play Joelle, then she knows that, did she know? I think she might have bet that Joelle would have lost to Hania. I mean, maybe that's where I would put my money. I think Hania doesn't give up that match easily. So if Gohar would want to play Joelle as much as possible, the easiest matchup, and she wants to eliminate Sherbini, because Sherbini is basically one of the few players, if not the only player, who can beat her consistently. Probably the only player who can beat her consistently right now. So I was really happy that Gohar didn't just take the route of, hey, let's make the next round easy, because I think for her to win the tournament, she had to do that. If she didn't beat Sherbini in that match, there was a very good chance Sherbini would actually be the one with the title, not her. So praise to her. I think that was really good that she was able to put on a good performance, even though she was already through to the next round. Obviously, there being incentive. So on to the finals. So Hania's match against Nouran. I remember like 3 years ago, people were questioning, Nouran Gohar's movement just wasn't very good. She couldn't get to the front very much. That's why, part of the reason why she plays to the back so much, just so that she can bury her opponents and prevent them from playing high accuracy shots to the front. But even then, I mean, her movement is just so solid. She's just always stable in her movement. And I mean, and that's still going with the fact what I just previously mentioned. She still hits it so accurately to the back. It is extremely difficult to attack her short. It's just, you're just way too far to hit anything consistently. So I was really impressed by her movement. I think Hania tried to, kind of, I wouldn't say, try to make it a more physical match, try to bring the endurance into it, but it was so difficult because Gohar was hitting very accurately. It was a hot court, bouncy ball. She didn't need to expend as much energy to drive it, so that probably helped her as well. But I definitely think one of the other, all what I said helped, but also Hani's a very rhythmical player. She doesn't have much of a hold very often. She tries to change up the heights, but she won't change up the pace. So what I mean by that is she won't hold it. She won't vary her swing pattern in order to change the timing of her swing, which is very effective against Gohar, because if you can get her off her movement just slightly, that means that her swing isn't going to be completely prepped, and you can get a few more loose shots and start putting more pressure on her movement. But that's just not part of Hania's game. I think it's something that she can go back and learn and kind of just bring into her matches against Gohar a bit more. She's obviously learning all the time, but that to me was the sort of fatal flaw of that of her tactics over her game, is that she just could not disrupt the movement enough of Gohar. I just found Gohar was just able to move on most balls very easily and just punch it straight or to depth at any at whim. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that matchup evolves. I definitely think that, again, Hania will learn a bit more of a hold. Her drop shot was way better this tournament. She was executing that far better and far more consistently than I'd seen her before. So, it was a very good match, very clean for the most part, and just brutal physically. There's a huge disparity within the women's game. Those top few players are just head and shoulders above. Say the top 5 or 6 players are just so far ahead of the rest of the field. So, it's a good challenge to other players to step up their physical game, definitely. So on the men's side, I feel like this is just, maybe it's not appreciated enough. You do not want to play to Asal's backhand as much as Shorbagy did. Maybe I'm not noticing something tactical. I know when Farag has beaten Asal in the past, it's all through twisting, through making Asal do more side-to-side movements rather than playing north to south. I think Asal's extremely good at moving from back to front, but definitely twisting him is a superior tactic. And I didn't find that Shorbagy was able to implement that in any way, or if he was trying to do that. He got into quite a few backhand deep rallies, which you do not want to do against Assault. I just find that Assault amongst any of the men's players, it may not necessarily be the most accurate. It was very accurate this tournament, by the way, but sometimes it's not the most accurate in terms of tightness, but he can vary the depth on that backhand so often. He changes the timing, does a lot of slingshots with the drives, and then when he feels like it, he can also basically whip it cross court, and it's so last minute. The shot itself doesn't remind me, like, his technique isn't like Ramy, but the effect is the same as Ramy, where you have so little time to react to what he's doing with the racket. There's very low backswing on a lot of his shots. So I really don't understand why Shorbagy was doing that. If anything, you know, I would say throw in more boasts, but it's tough. Again, in this tournament, Assault was way more accurate. He was hitting his drives a lot more deep. His movement's still insane. The only thing I would maybe say is, you know, take the court. You know, the court was a bit slippery. Maybe you can take advantage of that. But and Shorbagy has a great boast. I just felt that, you know, cross court drops, slice drops, those would have been nice to see a bit more. I feel like Shorbagy was trying to challenge Assault to that length game, and Paul Cole's done the same thing, and both of them have lost to it. So here's the thing: Assault's every single tournament he plays, Assault's just getting way better, much better every time. He's just constantly evolving, improving his game. I honestly think his victory over Farag was very important mentally. It gets him over Hunt. Mind you, Farag I think he was guaranteed last place in that last match against Assault anyway. So for him, it wasn't. In fact, for him, it might have been just, hey, if I lose to Assault, then Marwan's out. I don't know if there's an actual, subtle, deep-seated hatred there. Probably not, but maybe it felt good for him to get Marwan out of the tournament. I know they do have quite an intense rivalry, but in any case, Assault would have taken a lot of confidence out of that. There's just no players that except for, and he beat Moment, and Moment's beaten him in the past. I don't think Assault's beaten Moment before. So they're currently, I honestly don't think there's a player he hasn't beaten in the top 10. Maybe Macon. I think he's lost maybe to Macon when he was younger, but not really a match I would count at this point. I definitely think he would take out Macon. I shouldn't say easily, but I think Macon would be a preferential match for him. Yeah, so I don't think there's anyone in the top 8 that Assault hasn't or can't beat. Obviously, Gawad is still. I'm under the assumption Gawad's also not coming back from his injury anytime soon. So, right now Assault is putting himself into a very strong position for next season to make his push to world number 1. I think his youth, I think he is the next phenom. He can play at any pace. His movement is insane. He's got every shot in the book and some shots that no other player has, especially his cross-court drives are just way too deceptive. So his power is just, he has so much variation in his power. I can kind of heap praise on him. Obviously his choice of when to call lets is still poor. Slightly better, but I definitely think it'll take some time for him to kind of just recognize the fact that referees just aren't going to give him the benefit of the doubt anymore, if they ever did, and it'll come. I wholeheartedly believe he's going to be world number 1 probably sometime in 2022, if not the end of next season, and that's again assuming that we have a regular tournament schedule, which we may or may not. But obviously, I'm saying in the 2022, early in that 2022-2023 season, he will have that. Obviously, depending on how they release points from, because I think right now we're on almost like 2 years of ranking points affecting the ranking. So eventually, they're going to have to bring it back somehow. But until then, it's going to be it will be a little more difficult. But he's there. He is definitely a player nobody wants to face in any event. And you know what? This was another good tournament. I was a little disappointed by the refereeing. Some of the production value wasn't there, obviously with the lights and delays in the matches, but that's what you get with outdoors. It makes for great venues, and I definitely support doing that more. Just hopefully that hoping that PSA is a bit more organized in the future. I did see some improvements in the refereeing towards the end of the tournament. I'm really excited to see where PSA goes into the next year. I'm hoping that they get a lot more events, especially in the 50 to 70K range, where some of the top 20 or 20-30 players can actually build up their points again. So, you know what, we're just going to have to wait and see. Squash is still a bit of a poor man's sport, but, you know, hey, guys like me will always be here to rant about it and have our fun. So, you know, thanks for listening. Click the link to subscribe, hit like, and have a good night. Cheers.